Hey guys, it's Curtis with Wander With The Workmans, and today we're going to be starting a video series that I'm calling the First Trip series. And I put the air quotes out there because I'm going to tell you the story of our first trip, which was a grand total, epic distance of 3.5 miles. Now the whole purpose of this video series is to talk to people who are new to the RV lifestyle, or those of you who are out there considering the RV lifestyle and whether or not it's for you. Because one of the things that is a truth about RVing but doesn't necessarily always get talked about is that it's not always perfect sunrises with a warm cup of coffee in your hand, or unicorns grazing in a meadow as the leaves turn colors in the fall. No, sometimes there are days where it's life. It doesn't matter that you put your life on wheels. It's life, and things happen. But you get through them. You build experiences, and we're only 7 weeks out at the time I'm making this video, and our first, here we go, trip is already a fond memory that is a great punchline to a humorous anecdote. So I thought I'd share it with you, and also tell you that we're going to be talking to other full-time RVers about their first trip. And I hope that you see that it's worth the growing pains. It's worth the experience to get yourself down the road. So here it is. Here's our first epic journey of 3.5 miles. Yeah, 3.5. When Havla and I bought our 1998 Fleetwood Mallard, that we like to call Drake, it looked like 1998. The wallpaper was original, the upholstery was original, and when we talked to the person that sold it to us, he explained that he had bought it from another family and had the suspicion that it was just a weekender, that they weren't full-timers, they weren't regular travelers. It was just a recreational vehicle that they used occasionally. And so we brought it home in October of last year, 2017, and decided we were going to remodel the cosmetic portions of it. It was physically sound, with one exception. And even then, it probably was physically sound. I just got nervous, and that was the bearings. I didn't know anything about the bearings. What I did know was that this trailer had come out of Utah, and Utah is a big proponent of salt in the wintertime. So their roads are constantly covered with salt, constantly covered with brine, and that can create corrosion problems. And that this was a 20-year-old trailer that probably the bearings hadn't ever been maintained on. So that was one of the projects that I wanted to take on in the remodel, and I did. I did this. I had done bearing repacks on trailers before. It is not a terribly complicated thing. It is actually something you can handle. But in the process, I found out that we have very special axles. For those of you who are familiar with axles, you'll know that the average rating is 3,500 pounds. That's kind of the standard for a lightweight axle. Well, on our trailer, we have axles that are rated at 2,800 pounds. And this was a special experiment by Dexter Axle that only lasted about 5 years, and we just happened to pick up a trailer with these special axles on them. So I go through, I do the bearing repack. Excuse me. So I go through and I do the bearing repack, and it turns into a thing unto itself. Because these are special sized axles, they've got special angles on the bearings, there's not a lot of them running around, and they don't come in a standard replacement or maintenance pack. It took me 3 days just to track down the parts to replace the bearings and the races and the seals on these two axles. And at this point, I had gotten into the project thinking, oh, you know, bearings are standard. You go down, you get the maintenance pack. It's got the race, the bearing, the seal, everything you need. No. So I had left our spindles wrapped in cellophane, but basically exposed to the elements for about 4 days by the time I finally got the parts to finish the job. So here's a pro tip. Don't rush repairs and maintenance. Take your time and be thorough, because what I ended up doing was I ended up putting the outer bearing on backwards. And I didn't know it. As we got closer to pulling out on the road, we'd seen a lot of YouTube videos that had said, go out, do a test tow, do some backing exercises, get familiar with your trailer. We froze a little bit because this is our home. This isn't just a weekender. This isn't going to just ruin my hunting trip. This is our home. So we got really nervous about it. And we froze up. We didn't do the first test tow like we should have. So we burn the ships. We do the final inspection on the apartment. We hand over the keys. Everything's been sold. We have only what's in our trailer, and we only have our trailer as a home at this point. Give the keys back to the landlord. We pull out of the driveway, make it about 300 yards down the road. I look out the mirror, and one of my tires is at a 45-degree angle. Uh-oh. Now, luckily, we had planned to go to my parents' workshop, and they have a nice flat pad out in front of their workshop where we could get the trailer kind of level so we could adjust the weight distribution hitch, the sway bar, make sure the brakes on the trailer were tightened, that the brake controller itself was calibrated. We'd had all this in mind. We were going to go do that, then we were going to hit the road and go 90 miles down the road to see Havila's parents. By the time we made it the 3.5 miles to my parents' workshop, I now had 2 tires that were at a 45-degree angle. We get there, I pull out, I get some jacks, I get it off the ground, I pull the tire off, I go to pull the hub off, and the bearings come out in pieces. Brand new bearings, 3.5 miles on these things, and the frames that hold the bearings in places were broken. The bearings were coming out in pieces in my hands. The races were etched, all because I had flipped the outer bearing. They chewed themselves up in 3 miles. So we call the local tire shop and decide this is obviously out of my league. Let's get some professional help. So call the local tire shop. They say sure. They send somebody out. We're only a mile from the tire shop at this point, so they don't even charge us a service call. They just charged it like we had pulled it up onto the thing. $90 an axle. Really good job. Really good price for that job. And so he's working on them. He gets 3 of them done. Working on the 4th one, and you hear the guy from the tire shop pounding out the old races to put in the new ones. Tink, 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 tink. Shoot. Different word. He used a different word. Oh, man. He comes around the corner with kind of that hang dog. Could you come look at this thing? And I go around to where he was working on the hub. And a part of the casing, probably because they're 20-year-old castings, about this big, had broken off. There's no way to hold the back bearing and the seal in. Got to get a new hub. All right, fine. We call around. Parts store across the state says, yeah, we got one of those. Don't worry, it'll be there in a couple of days. Couple of days comes and goes. Nope, no hub. Call him back. Oh, well, we had one that looked like it was the right thing. Turns out it's not. Don't worry, we placed an order from the manufacturer. It'll be there in about a week. Okay. Week comes, week goes. No hub. Call them back. Well, the manufacturer only ships obsolete parts at the end of the month. Now, keep in mind, we broke down on the 19th. And so we're looking at about 21st, 22nd, 23rd, somewhere in that neighborhood. They're not going to ship this thing for another 7 days, and it's going to take a week to get from Indiana to Idaho. Well, it is what it is. So we wait. 30th comes. 7 days after that goes. Still no hub. And I got thinking about it. I've done some parts purchasing. I've worked in a couple of parts houses. Waiting till the end of the month to ship obsolete parts doesn't sound quite right. So I call up the manufacturer and I said, this is the deal. Guy on the other end of the phone in Indiana says, I have no idea what you're talking about. If you order a part, we ship it. It doesn't matter if it's obsolete or if it's brand new. We get the order, we put it in a box, it goes out in the mail. So, okay, well, this is what I'm being told. Do you have an order for me that you're planning to ship? He searches through his computer. Never heard of me, never heard of the parts store that we were working with in Idaho. I said, well, fine. Let's just, if I'm going to order the part from you, will you put it in the mail and get it to me? He says, sure. Problem is, I've never heard of these things before. I'm like, great. Perfect. So he does some searching, clickety-clack on the keyboard. You can hear it in the background of the phone call. Kind of thing. And he goes, We have one. Our inventory program says that we have one. Now keep in mind, you're trying to find a circle of metal that's about 3 inches tall and about a foot across in our warehouse. And the roof of our warehouse covers 3.5 acres. So it's going to take me some time if I can even find this needle in this haystack. I said, well, that's understandable. I don't like that answer, but it is what it is, right? And so I hang up with the guy. 2 hours later, he calls me back, and it's like this kid has gone to his first Easter egg hunt. He's like, I found it! Puts it in the mail, ships it to us. That is our epic 3.5-mile story. The part showed up. The tire store was able to install it just fine. It's running perfectly. We've put almost 5,000 miles on it now, and it's going strong. Probably never have a problem with that hub ever again. But that was our first trip, and I'll tell you what, that 3 weeks sitting there in front of my parents' workshop, knowing that we should have been on the road 2.5 weeks earlier, that we were itching, that we were stuck, was really frustrating. We're now 7 weeks down the road, so 10 weeks from our first trip. And it's already a punchline. We attended Nomad Fest in Wellington, Texas, and told this story. Told people about it, and everybody kind of goes, uh-huh. Got that knowing look on their face like, yep, been there, done that. And that's the truth. Everyone will have a first story, or everyone does have a first story when they choose to take off in an RV, whether it's for the weekend or for the rest of their lives. You have to start somewhere. Everybody's got a first trip, and the learning curve is incredibly steep. It's like a 6 or 7% grade, and it's got lots of twists and turns in it. But at the end of the day, it does become a fun story to tell. It becomes a fun memory. It becomes an experience, and that really is the payoff for RV living. You give up some comfort, you give up some certainty, but you gain a wealth of experience and a great story to tell people. Now, here's the best part about this story. This is only part 1 of our first trip. So stay tuned for part 2 of our first trip, which is just about as entertaining and was just about as frustrating in the moment as the first part. And stay tuned for other RVers' first trips, because as we travel around, we're going to be talking to everyone from weekend warriors all the way up to the seasoned first-timers about their first trip. If you want to know more about those first trips, if you like this story, you want to hear part 2, be sure to click subscribe. It's still down there. The subscribe button down below. Click on the little bell. Make sure you get notifications so you don't miss out on part 2 and the other stories in our first trip series. Also, you can find us on Instagram. We are Wander With The Workmans, and we'll see you down the road.